Hey, before we do today's video, I just want to remind you that this is the last week that you can join the raffle through my Patreon page. Every patron has an opportunity to win this month's giveaway. It is May 2019. The giveaway for this month is a mat. If you want to see the video, go ahead and click here and you'll be able to see the mat that we're going to be giving away. So go ahead and click on the link in the descriptions below to become a patron and have a chance to win the raffle. If it's past May of 2019, go ahead and click there anyway because we have a giveaway every month. Now on to the video. Hey everybody, this is Gaming Geek here with part 2 of Painting with a Noob. Unfortunately, our noob Roger is sick and we were scheduled to film today, and so I'm just going to go ahead and go solo as we prepare to paint our Joan of Arc game that's going to be coming very soon. I received my shipping notice, and so hopefully by the middle or end of June we will have it. But this is another opportunity for you to prepare by learning how to do washes. Now, washes is typically called talent in a bottle because washes actually is a very simple way to create shading and subtleties of tone in your miniatures with very little work. Washes is a huge part of, especially if you're a new painter, to be able to create really good quality miniatures. I'm going to go ahead and share with you the acrylic washes, which are commercially available. The ones that I have most of is Army Painter, as you can see here. I do have one bottle of Citadel Seraphim Sepia, which I use quite a bit. These are fairly expensive. I bought these in a kit. I think they're somewhere between $25 or so for all of these. And the primary ones that you're going to want are these ones: the Flesh Wash, the Soft Tone, the Strong Tone, and the Dark Tone. So these are, if you can get a hold of these four, I would say most of your shading can be done with those bottles. And here I gave you an example. These blood apes from the original Descent were primed white, and this is to show you the different shades that you're going to get. So here on the left you see this sort of, I think it's a little washed out, so let me move it over here away from the light. But you can see this is the flesh, and it's a little bit orangish, and that's to mimic the flesh tones, and usually you will use this on faces or on arms, body parts, and that's the Flesh Wash from Army Painter. This next tone is the Soft Tone, and so it's more brownish, but it's still pretty subtle, and so you're going to want to use this color on yellows or on reds. Some of the lighter colors you can use this Soft Tone. Compare that to the Strong Tone here on the left, and this again it looks black here on the screen, but is actually a really dark brown. And so the difference between the Strong Tone and the Dark Tone is the Dark Tone is black, and the Strong Tone you might use on some of the darker colors in order to get the shading to stand out. As well, here on the right I use Dark Tone primarily for metal when I am painting first with silver, usually armor or any weapons. I will go over with Dark Tone to create shading there. Also on the back here, just as an example, I did a little bit of the Seraphim Sepia by Citadel to compare and contrast with the color that you're going to get from the Soft Tone of Army Painter. Army Painter, I'm sorry, this is the Flesh Tone over here. The Citadel Seraphim Sepia is a little more brownish tan color compared to both the Soft Tone over here on the left as well as the Flesh Wash here on the right, which again I think is a little bit more sort of reddish or orangish. And then the Seraphim Sepia I use quite a bit on yellow. I really like the shading that it provides there. So let me go ahead and show you some of the examples of where I have used shading. And first off, I'm going to go ahead and show you these colored inks. So you can actually shade with different colors, and in the base set you get blue, red, green, and purple. And if you take a look at my orc here, I spray painted them with an olive green, and all I did to provide shading on the skin is to use the green wash. And so here, let me move it over here again. And you can see that the shading is all provided, and I did no highlighting afterwards. So I did a whole video on this. Go ahead and click up here to see how I went through this step by step. And then if you look at the yellow, the sort of gradations of color is from the Seraphim Sepia from Citadel. And so I really like the tone that that provides. If you look up here especially, I like how the skull is provided with multiple shades. As you look at that, I really like that effect. So that's what shading does for you. I basically paint the whole thing one color, and then the shading fills it in. So here's an example. This guy here, I just painted solid colors, and I call this block painting, where almost like paint by numbers, you're just painting solid colors all the way around, similar to this guy here. And these miniatures are from Core Space, a game that I'm gonna create a how to play video fairly soon. So compare that, these solid block colored miniatures, to one that is now shaded. So here I shaded this guy, the metal parts with the dark tone, and then most of the rest, his pants, was with the soft tone. And so based on the color that you're using, you can adjust with what shade you're going to use. Also with the colored miniature, with the colors you can provide shading for specific things. So for example here, my Abyssal Army, I spray painted these red and then used the red tone ink or red tone wash to again provide shading in there. I could have used either the sepia or the soft tone from Army Painter, but it gives you slightly different effects, and so depending on what kind of effect you're going for will determine which wash that you use. If you look here with my Tyranid Army, this was actually super easy because I spray painted these white with a primer, and instead of needing to go back and color all of these body parts that are purple, just with the base white, I used the purple wash on them, and that provides this kind of effect that you see, which I think looks really, really good. So this is a very fast and really easy way to get some of the tones that you want. So you want to experiment and see what base color that you want and what kind of effects that you can get from these different colored shades. And so here again on this guy, all of the red parts or pink parts I first painted with a very, very light pink, and then I used the red wash, and the red sunk in the recesses and provided natural shading. I did the same thing with the mouth. It was white, and I used green shade, green wash, to have that effect. So there's a lot of different things that you can do with shading in it, and you just experiment and see what kind of colors that you want. But this is a great way to do shading. Also, recently I did a video on these beholders, and I painted all of these with just using shading as well. I didn't even bother to go back and highlight. You can especially see the effect here on this ridge. So this was all a solid tan color, but I used, I think it was soft tone, right across here, and it created sort of this gradation of color and natural highlights. A lot of people will go back and dry brush lighter color to highlight the areas, but I wanted to make these as fast as possible. If you want to see that video, go ahead and click up here, and you'll be able to see a step-by-step process with that. Now, here is an economical way to do shading and washes, and that is actually to use Minwax poly shades, and the color that I use most often is Antique Walnut. And I use this when I have a ton of miniatures to paint. So you can see here my Zombicide figures. I did my entire Zombicide army that way. Also with the Rune Wars my skeletal army, I did that because skeletons actually do really well with that brown tone wash. And my Shadows of Brimstone, this guy here, again, I spray painted olive, the same color that I used with my orcs, but I used the brown walnut stain and got this cool effect. And because this figure is so huge, it's so large, and I'm going to use a lot of stain or wash, I prefer to just be more economical and use that. The tentacles, I didn't put the wash on there. I did a different color there, but the rest of the body and even the purple that's in the wings, I covered with the Minwax. The other benefit with Minwax is because it's polyshade with polyurethane in it, it provides a really thick protective coat. And so, especially if you're going to be throwing your miniatures in a box, not necessarily protecting them, this is the way to go because you're going to have a very strong protective covering over it. You do need to spray them with a matte spray because it will come out glossy. Even though this says satin, it does come out glossy, and so I sprayed all of this with the Tester's dull coat. But all of these, like this guy, was super easy to paint. He looks really complicated with a lot of different colors, but basically I spray painted him with a gray, a light gray, and then here I made a darker gray and made these colors here, these gross pustules, sort of an olive green. And once I was done with that, I went ahead and just, some people call it the dip method. I never actually dip because there's way too much stain that gets on them, and instead I brush it on, and you get this really cool effect where a lot of the details pop out. And washing, actually, you'll gain the benefits of washing when there's a lot of texture to the model. So these models here have a lot of hair and texture. So for example, these blood apes, right, you can really tell the difference because they have a lot of texture. So this guy here from Shadows of Brimstone also, I chose, even though it's gray, I chose the brown Polyshades Minwax because he's coming out of the ground, and so it creates sort of a different color effect on them by using the brown. Because traditionally you would think with gray you would use sort of a black wash or a dark tone wash, and sometimes that does look good, but with creatures like this I don't mind mixing it up a little bit, especially since it's a creature coming out of the ground. Here is a contrast of the different Minwax Polyshades that I did. Again, this is block painting, it's just solid flesh color. Here is the walnut, antique walnut effects of that, and see what a huge difference that makes between these two. Right? You can barely tell that there are recesses, but here it really makes it pop out because all of that shading goes naturally in there. And then I experimented with this. This was the espresso color in the Minwax Polyshades, and it's pretty dark as you can see, so I actually prefer the middle color of antique walnut. But this dark color would work well if you're using armor or blacks or things like that. That's where this darker shade might be better. Now there is one final alternative that I use for washes, and that is creating my own wash because sometimes they don't have colors that I need in order to wash something. And so sometimes I will use this Pledge Future. It's actually acrylic, see it says here, acrylic floor polish. And I actually don't think it's called this anymore, so I'll provide a picture and a link with what it is currently called. But basically it's an acrylic base, and it mixes with your regular paints, your miniature paints, or even craft paints, and makes it so that it will flow into the cracks and crevices. So check out this guy from Kingdom Death. And one of the colors that I often use with cloth, white cloth as a shade, yes, you can use gray, but I like sort of this light blue or grayish blue that goes into the cracks for my white cloth. And so what I do is I take some of my gray and grayish blue, actually this is craft paint, and I mix it. So the ratio that I use is maybe a drop or two of Pledge, and I actually store this in a smaller dropper bottle. and then just a drop of craft paint, my gray blue craft paint, and I mix it together, and the brush that I use is loaded with water as well, and then I just sort of paint it on, as you can see, on his robe. I also washed his body as well. I did flat color as well as his hair up here, and washed that with sepia. So that part is brownish. So I'm going to go ahead and set up the camera and show you what it looks like. It's fairly easy, you're just slathering it on. So in this example, I'm going to go ahead and use the strong tone, and really you are just covering the whole thing. Now I'm not going to do his face, because I don't want his face to be that dark. And you're just putting it on like this and making sure that it gets into all the cracks and crevices like this. And with the darker tones, with strong tone, I will have to go back over the white, but the good thing is, I don't know if you can see these subtle lines that's in here. I want it especially to get into the cracks there, because it will create and highlight the line, and I'll go back with the white and put it in there. See, it does darken the white quite a bit, and that's why I'll have to go back once it's dry to cover it. And then look, especially with the pants, let's see if it'll focus. The pants, which are gray, I just left it the same primer color, and it really fills it out that way. So he's pretty much done. That's how quick it is. And you don't want to keep rubbing over it, because I've heard of some people saying that when they rub a lot on the miniature, that the paint underneath starts somehow coming off. And so as you can see here, I'm just slathering it on like that and not really doing much more. Not really rubbing it in a lot. And so what's happening is all of those places where the paint can seep into, it goes in and creates natural shading. Now it does darken up the model overall, and that's why sometimes you'll have to go in and lighten up and highlight, or dry brush with highlights in order to counteract some of the shading that's happening. And usually with whites, with yellows, you'll need to do that, because those are the lighter colors anyway. With anything that's black, you don't wash typically, because you won't really notice any difference with blacks or really dark blues or anything like that. Washes won't really take where there's much of a noticeable difference. But that is pretty much how shading works. And so we're going to go ahead and let this dry, and then I'll go back and highlight. Now, a lot of my miniatures I don't bother highlighting at all, because I just want them to go on tabletop and to play. And especially since I have all of these miniatures that I'm trying to paint and get through for core space as quickly as possible, I don't really bother going back and highlighting. So for example, these guys, I just washed, and I didn't repaint or highlight with a lighter red on the body. So it's all up to you, but that is a quick and dirty way that you can make your miniatures really pop out. One of the questions that I do have is whether or not this method really is applicable for the 15mm size miniatures, and I'm curious to see what that will look like, because when something has that small of a features, sometimes shading is not necessary. But we're going to go ahead and see once we get the miniatures. I just want you to be prepared in case, especially with the larger miniatures, the dragon definitely, that's a good opportunity to do a wash. Consider getting some washes before your shipment comes in, and again we go step by step through the painting process. With Joan of Arc. Until then, go ahead and click on subscribe. Check out some of my other videos where I have a lot of painting tutorials using washes, and check those out. We'll see you next time.